Hi everyone, Michelle writes here. I am recording this talk on a New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year's everybody! And let's get started. Yesterday, the Russian president, Mr. Putin, and Joe Biden had a 50-minute talk over the phone about the Russia gearing up for war by Ukrainian borders. This conversation was very private, so private that American officials that heard the conversation only disclosed what everyone already knows. If Russia invades Ukraine, the West will respond accordingly with retaliatory military, technical measures as well as economic sanctions against Russia. Nothing else was clarified. Biden administration wants to continue this conversation another day. This day is January 10 in Geneva. Until then, this conversation will be under a category of a private business-like pre-negotiation. As you can see, this undeclared war is actually very mysterious. No one actually knows exactly what is the core of this war and what is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Russia foreign policymakers are known for never delaying their counterattacks, and they don't like to let their proposals tied up in endless discussions. Biden administration expects that Russia will make the decision of either invade Ukraine or not in the next month. My friends, save the day. According to Western intelligence, this war is set to happen at January 23. So the West should hurry up and follow up with their plan, because for American policymakers, time is cured for all wounds. As well, as you know, if Russia invades Ukraine, the West promises consequences that no one has ever seen. And until now, no one has ever seen or is expecting to ever see. But obviously, no one is particularly excited for this war to start. Because first, if this war was gonna start, the response from the West against Russia would lead to a World War III. And second, the economic sanctions against Russia that the West promises to deploy in case of an invasion would be a big loss for the economy of both the East and the West. Germany is even reconsidering its start to operate the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Russia can possibly be ejected from the SWIFT financial network, which will result in an economical pause in Russia's business. Thirdly, the results of this war can lead to a complete rupture of the US and Russia relationships. And surely no one is holding any interest for this war to continue either. Because if this war continues, it will destabilize and weaken the economy of Ukraine. Ukraine would then become the new wall between the East and the West. Then Ukraine would turn into a colony from the West, or even worse, without economic and military power. Ukraine would be forced back to Moscow's orbit. That's why some Ukrainians rather see this war happening instead of living under this deadlock. This war has been so stressful that Ukrainians believe that if this war have inevitably needs to happen, then for God's sake, let it be. And let it be sooner rather than later. Because if this war finally happens, the fog can be clear and Ukraine can hit the hammer and move on to the next agenda. An agenda that concerns with the interests of the citizens of Ukraine and that seeks to allocate the funds of the war back to Ukrainians' pockets. The end of this war would be a gift for Russians as well. Yeah, Eastern social media influencers called out to stop what they called this madness, for they see no reason for this war to even happen. There is a big sentiment against any type of war from the East, especially war against Ukraine, because a lot of Russians think that fighting Ukraine is like fighting themselves, because they see Ukraine as more than a neighbor. Ukraine for them is like a legit brother or sister. The truth is that it's so difficult to ever understand this war fully and to know for sure who is funding this war. Because listen to this very intriguing thought. It's possible that Russia had actually fortified NATO and West alliances by threatening an invasion. Russia, representing an imminent danger, had united the countries that were not even members of NATO until now. Even Sweden and Finland, that are not NATO members, are considering an alliance now, because Russia had painted a picture of how it is like to survive without the support of the Western Mutual Defense Pact. Also, Russia, with the threat of an invasion, had fortified Ukrainian national identity. In a recent poll, 24% of Ukrainians reported that they would resist Russian occupation with a weapon in hand. More than half of Ukrainians would vote for NATO membership. Therefore, if it was Russia's plans to destabilize the West, this plan had backfired. Now listen to this very shocking message. Right now, Russians might be ice skating and drinking tea. They don't consider themselves in danger. They believe that Mr. Putin is just taking precautions, because Kiev has pulled into its troops into Russia's borders, so normally it's expected that Putin would take the same reasonable measures. And even more shocking, right now Ukrainians might be dancing and celebrating the New Year's. They are simply living their lives and not scared at all. Only Ukrainians residents to the contact line bordering with the war are in fact concerned. An 89 years old Ukrainian woman says she doesn't want to live anymore. This poor old woman says she hears the bullets flies above her house every night. The noise of the shooting is so disturbing that she barely can take her much needed naps. A 15 years old Ukrainian girl says she's being awakened by the sounds of the chilling and she feels tired at school every morning. Oh no! It's hard to believe on anything you ever hear about this war, and even harder to take sides on this conflict. What do we want? We want Russia to de-escalate right now? To take down the tension and move forces back? What about the West? Do you want the West to roll back military deployment and freeze NATO expansion? Who actually created this international crisis? One thing is for sure, peace is unlikely to happen right now. Russia's foreign minister had accused the US of smuggling tanks with unidentified chemical components into Ukrainian territory. This proves that the worst can happen. What is the worst? Is a nuclear war. As Biden said, no one wins a nuclear war. Russia warned that everyone will be turned into radioactive ash if there is no constructive response within a reasonable amount of time, and if the West continues with its aggressive line, then Russia will act accordingly. Wow, what do you think is more likely to happen in the near future? Now, tell me, what is the best and the worst book you ever read this year? Well, Jordan Peterson had recommended me a book called The Gulag Archipelago, and I made the mistake to read it. This was the first time I ever regretted reading a book. I realized that just as some ideas cannot be unthought, some stories can never be untold. In this non-fiction literary investigation, a man described what used to happen with the people in prisons in labor camps under the Bolsheviks' orders. So this man apologizes for not remembering every person's name in the stories, but I was so impressed with the fact that he could remember so many events, each one worse than the other. A wealth of memories of intoxicating facts living inside of his head. Poor man. That book had me traumatized. Even though I read the Black Book of Communism, nothing compared to the Gulag Archipelago. So tell me, what is the most negative book you ever read? And yes, this was the update of the Russia and Ukraine war. If you want to follow me along, subscribe to this channel, like and share. Bye! Happy New Year's!